بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم حميم تنزيل الكتاب من الله العزيز العليم غافر الذنب وقابل التوب شديد العقاب ذي الطول لا إله إلا هو إليه المصير.
الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على أشرف المرسلين نبينا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين. We continue inshallah ta'ala with Surah Ghafir and ayah number 5 and 6, and if we have time inshallah ta'ala we'll continue. I'll recite these two verses inshallah. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. كذبت قبلهم قوم نوح والأحزاب من بعدهم وهمت كل أمة برسولهم ليأخذوه وجادلوا بالباطل ليدحضوا به الحق فأخذتهم فكيف كان عقاب وكذلك حقت كلمة ربك على الذين كفروا أنهم أصحاب النار. The first ayah number 5, the translation: the people of Nuh denied before them and the disbelieving factions after them, and every nation intended a plot for their messengers to seize them, and they disputed by using falsehood to attempt to invalidate thereby the truth. So I seized them, and how terrible was my penalty. So the previous ayah: ما يجادل في آيات الله إلا الذين كفروا فلا يغررك تقلبهم في البلاد. Those who dispute concerning the signs of Allah, those who oppose the haqq, the truth, with their own desires and reason, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala warned them that they are the ones these are the disbelievers. The disbelievers are those who oppose the revelation from Allah, the wahy, and they oppose the truth with falsehood. So calling the believers not to be deceived by them. فَلَا يَغْرُرْكَ تَقَلُّبُهُمْ فِي الْبِلَادِ. As we said, that al-ghurur is when someone think of something to be good when it's evil. And that's the worst thing that can happen to a human being on the face of earth. When someone is not able to see and to differentiate between what is right and what is wrong. Because the two important powers that a person should have in this life is quwwatul ilm, the power of knowledge, and the knowledge for the person to know what is right and what is wrong. And then the other form of power is al-amal, to act upon what he knows of being the truth. And no one owns the truth. And that's why when people talk one versus the other and against each other, human beings versus human beings. And the truth to them can be as the number of human beings on the face of earth. The only one that owns the truth is Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And the only way that people would get to know what with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is the wahy from Allah. So don't be deceived by how they are well established on the face of earth, with all kinds of wealth and power, and that this is not permissible. It's not permissible for a person to be deceived by seeing people having strength with wealth and power and thinking that this is then they have to be upon the truth. The truth is not known by this, but rather the people, they have to acquire the truth, and has nothing to do with wealth and power and so on. Then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, as He says, ثُمَّ هَدَّدَ مَنْ جَادَلَ بِآيَاتِ اللَّهِ لِيُبْطِلَهَا كَمَا فَعَلَ مَنْ قَبْلَهُ مِنَ الْأُمَمِ. Then this is warning from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to those who dispute the ayat of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, to make it look like it's falsehood when it's the truth, and to remind them of what happened to the nations before. Because the sunnah of Allah, the way of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala on the face of earth is the same thing as we said. There is nothing new in humanity. They are doing the same thing. People are repeating, and may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala give you patience for all the repetition, but this is important. In the day of judgment, and this is the reality of this life, people are nothing but actions. So the actions, it doesn't matter whether they were at the time of Nuh alayhi salam, or the time that we're living in today. Actions are actions. There is belief and disbelief. There is righteousness and wickedness. There is good deeds and bad deeds. So, therefore, when the nations before are mentioned, to show that this is a way that is a continuous one and that the path is the same, so those who are present are warned from what happened in the past. And this is how to learn from the past, to see the way of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And then also the Quran shows us what's going to happen in the future, in the day of judgment. So, قوم نوح, وعاد, كذبت قبلهم قوم نوح والأحزاب من بعدهم. He says here قوم نوح وعاد والأحزاب من بعدهم. الأحزاب is the plural of الحزب. الحزب is any group of people that they're upon the same thing, upon the same belief, upon the same objectives. So this is what al-Hizb parties. So والأحزاب من بعدهم, and those parties, those who came after them. So they were all of them upon one thing. الذين تحزبوا وتجمعوا. They made themselves together. They were all upon one thing, to be against the truth. There might be from many different backgrounds, many different deviations and dalal and disbelief. But one thing that bring them all together is that they all came together to oppose the truth, to oppose the haqq. The haqq is one, the truth is one, and the falsehood endless. So when they all get together to oppose the haqq, then they act as if they are one when they're not. تحسبهم جميعا وقلوبهم شتى. You think that they're all together, but their hearts are شتى, against one another. But they only got together for what reason? So to oppose the حق, the truth. الذين تحزبوا وتجمعوا على الحق, to oppose the truth. ليبطلوا. يبطلوا, this is the verb of al-batil. Al-batil is falsehood. So the verb of it, يبطل al-haq. For someone either to make, there's an action here, right? And this is where linguistically you won't find a verb, that you have to add some things to it. But in Arabic, there is إبطال الباطل or إبطال الحق. Someone, one's actions, one's individual action, is a person trying to make the falsehood more falsehood, or to make it falsehood. His actions of adopting the falsehood, his action of spreading the falsehood. What is he doing? He's making the batil batil. The batil is already batil. The falsehood is already falsehood, but it can be hidden in a place. So the action of the person, he is making the falsehood clearly falsehood. His act of making the falsehood, right? So this is what the verb is. Or doing the opposite. Someone would yubtil al-haq. Someone is trying to oppose the truth, to make the truth looks like batil. So yubtil al-haq. So either a person is making ibtal al-batil or ibtal al-haq, right? And this is the action of the human beings. Ibtal al-batil, this is the ways of the believers. It's already batil, but they make it clear that this is batil. They remove the deception by following the wahy from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And for the disbelievers, for the evil ones, they try to make ibtal to the haqq. They make the haqq looks like falsehood. So وَتَجَمَّعُوا الْحَقِّ لِيُبْطِلُوا وَعَلَى الْبَاطِلِ لِيَنْصُرُوا. They all get together for what? To be against the truth, to make the truth looks like it's falsehood, and they get together to make the batil, to aid the batil, to aid the falsehood, to support the falsehood, the deviation, the evil actions, and the evil beliefs, and so on. So they were all together. كذبت قبلهم قوم نوح والأحزاب من بعدهم, and these parties after them. وهمت كل أمة برسولهم ليأخذوه. وهمت كل أمة, as the ayah says, and where it says here, and they disputed, to attempt to invalidate, to attempt. So وهمت كل أمة. He says here in the Tafseer, وأنه بلغت بهم الحال وآل بهم التحزب إلى أنه. When people are upon something like what we heard, then it take them one step after the other. It reach them to where they, as it's mentioned in the ayah, همت كل أمة, every nation attempted. And al-hamm here is to attempt to do something. That means a person is already altogether upon one thing that he needs to do, so he start taking the means. همت كل أمة برسولهم. to be against their messengers, ليأخذوه, to seize the messenger, to kill the messenger, to stop the messenger. أي يقتلوه. يأخذوه here أي ليقتلوه, to kill the messengers. وهذا أبلغ ما يكون للرسل. This is the worst thing that they can ever do. And these are the messengers الذين هم قادة أهل الخير. They are the leaders, they are the best, those who would lead people to what is good. Messengers were sent not for the destruction of the human beings, not to cause harm to them, but they were sent so that the people will be upon what is good. So how can someone be the best men ever walked on the face of earth, and imagine someone that tried to kill them? Then there's nothing worse of a crime than this. الذين معهم الحق الصرف, those who have the pure truth. الذي لا شك فيه ولا اشتباه. The messengers of Allah, they are upon the haqq, they have the pure truth. Why? Because they're messengers of Allah. Revealed to them the ultimate truth from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. No doubt in it and no ambiguity in it. اشتباه. هموا بقتلهم. They would attempt to kill them, because not all of the messengers are killed. Some of them were killed. Some of them they attempt to kill them. فهل بعد هذا البغي والضلال والشقاء إلا العذاب العظيم? Is there any after this transgression and deviation anything but the great punishment from Allah الذي لا يخرجون منه, that they would never leave it whatsoever? And that's why أشد الناس عذابا, one of the worst people punishment in the day of judgment, those who killed the prophet or harmed the prophet, because there's nothing worse than that when it comes to the rights of the human beings. And the same thing falls in the same levels. That means harm is haram. Causing harm to others is haram, is forbidden, is a sinful thing. But when someone is closer to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and he's being harmed, that sin is such a bigger sin than someone that is less. As the hadith al-Qudsi, من عاد لي وليا فقد آذنته بالحرب. Whoever have enmity towards any of the awliya of Allah, those who are close to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says He declared war against him. As we said, the war from Allah is not like the human beings when they wage war. The worst thing that can happen to a person in this life is for the heart to be sealed, not able to see the truth anymore, so they'll continue to be upon falsehood till they die and they enter the hellfire, wal-'iyadhu billah. Even if they're given the best wealth and health and so on, but they're upon falsehood. So he says here, nothing worse than that. ولهذا قال في عقوبتهم الدنيوية والأخروية. That's why Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said about their punishment in this life and in the hereafter, فأخذتهم فكيف كان عقاب. So they attempted to kill the messengers, ليأخذوا, to kill them, فأخذتهم. The same word is used as a punishment from Allah, because the punishment is from the same actions. فأخذتهم أي بسبب تكذيبهم وتحزبهم, because of their denying the truth and getting all together to oppose the truth and the messengers of Allah. فكيف كان عقاب. This is a question. How was then this punishment? It's a question that gives the meaning of affirming the fact that this is the worst punishment, because it's from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. كان أشد العقاب وأفظعه, the most intense of punishment and the most terrible one. إن هو إلا صيحة أو حاصب ينزل عليهم, as it's mentioned in other parts of the Quran, whether it's a shout, whether it's a حاصب from above them that would ruin them, and stones from above, one shout and they are all destroyed. أو يأمر الأرض أن تأخذهم في البحر أو البحر أن يغرقهم, or the earth to take them like a sinkhole, to destroy them, or the oceans to make them drowned. فإذا هم خامدون, all of a sudden they're nothing they were before, but now there are no appearance to them whatsoever. And this is for the nations before. This is the way of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in the nations before, as what's mentioned in the Quran about the people of Nuh and Ad and Thamud and so on. فَكُلًّا أَخَذْنَا بِذَنْبِهِ. He refers to this by the ayah فَكُلًّا أَخَذْنَا بِذَنْبِهِ فَمِنْهُمْ مَنْ أَرْسَلْنَا عَلَيْهِ حَاصِبًا وَمِنْهُمْ أَخَذَتْهُ الصَّيْحَةُ till the end. So they all ceased because of their sins. And they received that sins in this worldly life, and in the hereafter they're in the hellfire forever. وكذلك حقت كلمة ربك على الذين كفروا أنهم أصحاب النار. وكذلك, this is now shows the continuity of it. This is the way of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. كذلك حقت كلمة ربك. as it says, and thus has the word of your Lord come into effect upon those who disbelieved that they are companions of the fire. So, وكذلك, and like the wow here, to show that this is a continuous matter. أي كما حقت على أولئك حقت عليهم. As it was upon those who before, then it's also upon those who are present, those who are at the time of the Prophet عليه الصلاة والسلام. And kalimatullah, the word of Allah of punishment, that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala punished them as a result of their actions. He's the most just subhanahu wa ta'ala. على أولئك حقت عليهم كلمة الضلال التي نشأت عنها كلمة العذاب. So the deviation that led them to the punishment from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. ولهذا قال إنهم أصحاب النار, that they are the people of the hellfire. This is the kalima of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the decree of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala upon them. So because they are following the same thing, as Ibn Kathir rahimahullah, he said, كما حقت كلمة العذاب على الذين كفروا من الأمم السابقة. So it's the same punishment because of the same actions. And this is how, again, human beings are not able to invent any more actions. It's the same categories of actions, good versus evil, and it's all stated clearly in the Quran and the Book of Allah and the Sunnah of the Prophet عليه الصلاة والسلام. Then after that, the ayah الذين يحملون العرش ومن حوله يسبحون بحمد ربهم ويؤمنون به ويستغفرون للذين آمنوا ربنا وسعت كل شيء رحمة وعلما فاغفر للذين تابوا واتبعوا سبيلك وقهم عذاب الجحيم ربنا وأدخلهم جنات عدن التي وعدتهم ومن صلح من آبائهم وأزواجهم وذرياتهم إنك أنت العزيز الحكيم وقهم السيئات ومن تق السيئات يومئذ فقد رحمته وذلك هو الفوز العظيم. Now this is another subject about the angels, those who carry the throne, as the first ayah, those angels who carry the throne and those around it exalt Allah with praise of the Lord and believe in Him and ask forgiveness for those who have believed, saying, Our Lord, you have encompassed all things in mercy and knowledge, so forgive those who have repented and followed your way and protect them from the punishment of the hellfire. And then it keeps on going with more of the dua that is mentioned here for the believers. So this is after talking about the severe wa'id and the warning against those who disbelieved and opposed the truth. Then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentioned the believers, which is always the way of the Quran. Kitabu Mathani, after what's mentioned about the disbelievers, now the believers. And you see the difference, so that the reciter of the Quran would choose to be among the believers. So here يخبر تعالى عن كمال لطفه تعالى بعباده المؤمنين. He mentions subhanahu wa ta'ala how the perfect lutf of Allah, and the lutf of Allah from the name of Allah al-Latif, that means the most subtle in the mercy reaching His ibad without them knowing that it's coming to them. So this is the lutf of Allah towards the believers. The nations before, the ways of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala on the face of earth, the disbelievers, the evildoers, they might have power, they might have means to oppress and to kill and so on. So those who look at that scene, they might think, where is the mercy of Allah to the believers? It's happening, but people are not seeing it. The fact that there are believers in the midst of all of these evil, that's by itself is sufficient enough. Because what's the believers are for in this life? What's their covenant between them and Allah? Is to enter the Jannah of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala because of their belief. And their concern is that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala keep them steadfast upon al-Iman. And this is their main objective, because this life will finish. What stays forever is the everlasting life in the hereafter. And if matters of goodness comes in this life, mashallah, this is by the will of Allah. But this is not their covenant with Allah, not to be necessarily established on the face of earth. And if they're not, then they leave al-Iman? Of course not. So the believers, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala bestows His mercy upon them even in the worst situations ever, by keeping them upon their Iman, their belief, by them doing the acts of worship that can never be shown unless it's times of difficulties, till they return to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So this is the lutf of Allah and what He prepares for them. Again, if people see the unseen, and the more they suffer in this life, more things are being prepared for them in the hereafter. Then they will have the patience and they will be pleased with Allah. Well, that's what the Quran says. So that means be patient, be pleased with the qadar of Allah, continue to be upon the one thing that should never compromise, which is Al Iman. Anything else might come, might not come. But the worst thing to be lost is Al Iman. So he says here, كمال لطفه بعباده المؤمنين وما قيض لأسباب سعادتهم من الأسباب الخارجة. This is what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala made for the means of their happiness. قيض لأسباب the means of their happiness is well established, is very clear for them to be happy. من الأسباب الخارجة عن قدرهم, from the outside means that is not from them, beyond their capacity, over their power. من استغفار الملائكة. يعني again, if the angels are seeking forgiveness for the believers, isn't that sufficient enough for them? This is better than the entire world and whatever it contains. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, الذين يحملون العرش ومن حوله يسبحون بحمد ربهم. So he says, before we get into this, he says, من استغفار الملائكة المقربين لهم ودعائهم لهم بما فيه صلاح دينهم وآخرتهم. As the dua, beautiful dua that is mentioned in these verses, that the angels are making this dua to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for the believers, that has the best of this world and the hereafter for them. And the dua of the angels is accepted because they are sinless. وفي ضمن ذلك الإخبار عن شرف حملة العرش. And also, as this is mentioned, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentioned how honored are they, the carriers of the throne of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the angels. ومن حوله, and those who are close to it. وقربهم من ربهم, because of their closeness to their Lord. Anything that is close to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, it's the most beautiful. وكثرة عبادتهم, their constant ibadah to Allah. ونصحهم لعباد الله, and they have the concern towards the slaves of Allah. The angels, they are concerned about the believers. لعلمهم أن الله يحب ذلك منهم, because they know that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala loves that from them. So the ayah says, الذين يحملون العرش, those who carry the arsh, the throne of Allah, أي عرش الرحمن الذي هو سقف المخلوقات, which is the ceiling of all of the creation. Nothing beyond that. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is above his creation. وأعظمها وأوسعها, the throne of Allah, the biggest of all of the creation of Allah, and the most beautiful of it, and the closest there is to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. الذي وسع الأرض والسماوات والكرسي. The arsh of Allah is greater than the heavens and the earth and the kursi and everything. وهؤلاء الملائكة قد وكلهم الله تعالى أو وكلهم الله تعالى بحمل عرشه العظيم. And these angels, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gave them this job to carry the arsh, the throne of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. فلا شك أنهم من أكبر الملائكة وأعظمهم وأقواهم. Therefore they are the best of the angels, they are the greatest of the angels. And as a rule, always, anything that is from the unseen, especially when we talk about Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, never to make analogy to what people see in this life, because nothing is the like of Allah. So this is where deviants, they fell into these types of traps of shaitan, when they would think of a human being and a throne of a human being, and someone is carrying the throne of a human being. That means the human being is in need of the carriers, and without the carriers, the throne is going to fall. This human being thinks this is all nothing to do with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So when they allowed themselves to make tashbih, to draw similarities, they denied it. They said, no, then it cannot be. So that means they would start denying these things that Allah stated in the Quran, alter it, twist the meanings of it, so that it doesn't mean what it's being said. It's very easy, and much easier than all of this, to say Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala knows how these things are. And we believe in it the way it is, and we believe that nothing is the like of Allah. لَيْسَ كَمِثْلِهِ شَيْءٍ وَهُوَ السَّمِيعُ الْبَصِيرُ subhanahu wa ta'ala. So these are and then to be busy with what is meant by this, and it shows the greatness of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So they are the best of the angels. So that's why it shows the honor that Allah honored the believers with. That the best of the angels, and the angels are sinless creation of Allah, but the best of them, the carriers of the arsh, this is what they do. They make tasbih and thana on Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. وَيَحْمِلُ عَرْشَ رَبِّكَ فَوْقَهُمْ يَوْمَئِذٍ ثَمَانِيَةٌ, 8 of them. وَمَنْ حَوْلَهُ, and for those who are close and around the عرش of Allah من الملائكة المقربين في المنزلة والفضيلة. يسبحون, what do? These angels, the best of all of the angels, يسبحون بحمد ربهم, they're making tasbih and tahmid, glorifying Allah and praising Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And tasbih wa tahmid, subhanallah and alhamdulillah, wa subhanallah wa bihamdi. And we are taught to say these things, what the angels would do. هذا مدح لهم بكثرة عبادتهم لله تعالى. This is praising them because of how much ibadah they do to Allah. وخصوصا especially التسبيح والتحميد, especially التسبيح والتحميد. Something that if a person is able to make dhikr of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala constantly, there's nothing better than التسبيح والتحميد. وسائر العبادات تدخل في تسبيح الله وتحميده. Also the rest of the ibadat, the rest of acts of worship, it's part of the tasbih. The word tasbih can be given to the salah, for example. Subhat al-duha. Prophet ﷺ called it tasbih. When you pray salat al-duha, this is tasbih. Any salah is tasbih and tahmid. We'll finish inshallah at 6:30. If you want to, guys, anybody wants to leave, please feel comfortable. Don't be at ease. If you want to pray, inshallah. I'm just saying I don't want to hold anyone. Jazakallah khair. Barakallah fiik. So يسبحون بحمد ربهم. So the tasbih itself, making the dhikr, subhanallah, alhamdulillah, and so on. And also to make salah, this is also tasbih. وسائر العبادات تدخل في تسبيح الله وتحميده لأنها تنزيه له عن كون العبد يصرفها لغيره وحمد الله تعالى. Now this is how the salah is called tasbih, because the salah itself and the ibadah itself is tanzih, is stating by your ibadah that this ibadah is not to be done to other than Allah. So that's what the tasbih is, that you state that no one is worthy of any such a perfect praise and worship except Allah. So you're negating anything of weakness and deficiencies to Allah, and that's is there when a person makes salah. And the other part of it, alhamd, by praising Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And you say subhanallah al-azim, subhana rabbi al-azim, subhana rabbi al-a'la. And we have to really work on our hearts with these things, that a person is doing the tasbih and the tahmid in the salah and praising Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. He says, بل الحمد هو العبادة لله تعالى. Alhamd is the ibadah to Allah, the perfect praise to Allah. وأما قول العبد سبحان الله وبحمده, to say subhanallah وبحمده فهو داخل في ذلك. This is included also. وهو من جملة العبادات. And this is from the ibadat. So the angels يسبحون بحمد ربهم, they make tasbih and they make dhikr of Allah, they make all kinds of ibadat to Allah, which is all the ibadat are basically tasbihun wa tahmid. But more of the tahmid, perfect praise to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And if we reflect upon the salah, it establishes this very clearly. And these great angels, وَيَسْتَغْفِرُونَ لِلَّذِينَ آمَنُوا, and they seek forgiveness from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to the believers. وهذا من جملة فوائد الإيمان, one of the greatest benefits of al-Iman, and فضائله الكثيرة جدا, and the great virtues of al-Iman. When we were talking about how important it is al-Iman, one of which is this, that the angels يستغفرون للذين آمنوا, they're seeking forgiveness from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to the believers. أن الملائكة الذين لا ذنوب عليهم, these angels that have no sins on them whatsoever, يستغفرون لأهل الإيمان, they seek forgiveness from Allah to the people of al-Iman. فالمؤمن بإيمانه تسبب لهذا الفضل العظيم. This statement is very strong. فالمؤمن بإيمانه, the believer, because of their iman, they are the means for this great fadl. So the angels are not making dua and istighfar for everyone. It's because of the actions of the believers. When they did the act of al-Iman, that caused the angels, Hamalatul Arsh, to make dua to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for them. So it shows the virtues of al-Iman. ولما كانت المغفرة لها لوازم لا تتم إلا بها غير ما يتبادر إلى كثير من الأذهان أن سؤالها وطلبها غايته مجرد مغفرة الذنوب. This is another point. When the maghfirah, when the forgiveness from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has lawazim, has things that comes by necessity, other than what many people they think or comes into their minds when they think about al-istighfar and seeking forgiveness, that asking for the forgiveness and to seek it, this is the ultimate goal of it is what? Is the forgiveness of the sins, right? But he says ذكر تعالى صفة دعائهم لهم بالمغفرة بذكر ما لا تتم إلا به. He mentioned the characteristics, the way of their dua for forgiveness with something that can never be attained except by it. فقال ربنا وسعت كل شيء رحمة وعلما. Our Lord, you encompassed everything mercy and knowledge. فعلمك قد أحاط بكل شيء. Your knowledge encompassed everything. لا يخفى عليك خفية. Nothing is hidden from Allah. ولا يعزب عن علمك مثقال ذرة في الأرض ولا يعزب عن علمك مثقال ذرة في الأرض ولا في السماء. لا يعزب, nothing is away when it comes to the knowledge of Allah, even the weight of a mustard seed in the earth or in the heavens. ولا أصغر من ذلك ولا أكبر. Not even less, small or big, unless it's under the knowledge of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. ورحمتك وسعت كل شيء, and your mercy encompasses everything. فالكون علويه وسفليه قد امتلأ برحمة الله تعالى. All of the universe is filled with the mercy of Allah. ووسعتهم, all of that is encompassed by the mercy of Allah. ووصل إلى ما وصل إليه خلقه, and reach them with, the mercy of Allah reaches where the خلق of Allah, all of the creation of Allah. So then فاغفر للذين تابوا. So as a result of that, forgive those who repented من الشرك والمعاصي واتبعوا سبيلك, and they followed your path باتباع رسلك بتوحيدك وطاعتك, by following the messengers and the tawheed of Allah and His obedience. وقهم عذاب الجحيم, and shield them from the punishment of the hellfire. قهم العذاب نفسه, shield them from the punishment itself. وقهم أسباب العذاب, and shield them from the means of العذاب. So, and then the dua continues, but we'll stop here inshallah ta'ala. So as you see, this is a great virtue of al-Iman, that the angels, because of the Iman of the believers, because of the belief of the believers, which shows the importance of it, they seek forgiveness. وَيَسْتَغْفِرُونَ لِلَّذِينَ آمَنُوا. They seek forgiveness from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for the believers to have it. And they would say, this is their dua. رَبَّنَا وَسِعْتَ كُلَّ شَيْءٍ رَحْمَةً وَعِلْمًا. And we learn from the dua of the angels that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentions, which is inspired to them by Allah. And praising Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala with the perfect praise. And since everything is by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and everything encompassed by the mercy of Allah and His knowledge, فَاغْفِرْ لِلَّذِينَ تَابُوا. Forgive those who repented to you, O Allah. وَاتَّبَعُوا سَبِيلَكَ وَقِهِمْ عَذَابَ الْجَحِيمِ. Which shows also the means for the forgiveness. So the dua, as he mentioned here, is al-Iman, al-Tawbah, al-Ittibā'. This is what's mentioned in the ayah. Al-Iman, because the disbelievers, there is no dua for them till they believe. So al-Iman. And then at-Tawbah, because this is how to because the Iman alone might be weak. So the only way to make the Iman strong and complete is with Tawbah, constantly repenting to Allah. And the Iman and the Tawbah can never be attained unless it's by following the path of Allah, which is what's mentioned about the messengers of Allah. Just following the messengers of Allah. And how simple the matter is, and therefore وَقِهِمْ عَذَابَ الْجَحِيمِ, and more of the dua to come. And many of these things that we even as Muslims dispute, even in some small levels, as it's not nothing small whatsoever, if we just apply this, وَاتَّبَعُوا سَبِيلَكَ, follow. We don't have to invent anything. People start having debates in the month of Rabi' al-Awwal, the birthday of the Prophet ﷺ, celebrate or not celebrate, and it's all every year huge debates. Who initiated that debate? Those who invented it, right? Before this was in place, the haqq would never require for people to debate over it. The time of the Prophet ﷺ, there was no such a debate. The time of the Sahaba radiallahu anhu, there was no debate. Tabi'een, there was no debate about the celebration of the birthday of the Prophet ﷺ. Tabi'een, there was no debate and disputes about the celebration of the birthday of the Prophet ﷺ. The time of the Imam al-Arba'a, none of that was there. Till the Fatimis came. And the Fatimis were kuffar. And they initiated all of these types of things. And then the disputes comes, and then the easiest way of all of this, even from a lay person to look at it, just go back to how things were before these disputes happened. That means do what the Prophet ﷺ did and the Sahaba radiallahu anhu, what emotions, and then tahazzub and parties and angry with each other, and that person defeated the others, and saying things that can sound as if it's some terminologies of knowledge and big words of what this alim said and what this alim said, and so on and so on, where there's no sahabis being mentioned, no tabi'is being mentioned, and the other ulama, because a person would say, but the ilm is established. Yes, some ulama said, go ahead and celebrate for the sake of argument, and some ulama said, don't. So what do we do in this as a layperson? فإن تنازعتم في شيء فردوه إلى الله ورسوله. If you dispute about a matter, return back to Allah and His Messenger صلى الله عليه وسلم. اتبع. الاتباع, follow. We follow them. We follow the early generations of Islam in what they've done and what they didn't do. So we ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to make it easy, inshallah, for all of us, inshallah. But the dua will be continued because of the time. We'll stop here, inshallah. Sallallahu alaihi wasallam, Muhammad wa sahbihi wasallam. If there's any, it took a long time here, but attendance code is Lutfullah. Lutf Allah. The Lutf of Allah. Anything that's not clear? No. الله يبارك فيك، جزاك الله خير. طيب ننتهي ان شاء الله tomorrow ان شاء الله. صلى الله وسلم وبارك على محمد وآله وصحبه وسلم. سبحانك اللهم ربنا وبحمدك اشهد ان لا اله الا انت استغفرك واتوب اليك.